the Sydney update. As you can see, I've got the magnificent Sydney Opera House behind me, one of the most iconic buildings in the world. I thought it was very pertinent to do the Sydney update. So I spent the last day traveling all over Sydney, talking to a lot of people, trying to find out and understand what is going on in the market. When it comes to the property market here, this city is really starting to pump again. It went through 5 years of very sort of lateral, and in fact it had the Olympic Games in 2000. It grew quite dramatically to 2002, and then it really leveled off for 5, 6 or 7 years. And the reason is because the affordability was out of kilter. But you know what's happened is that there's been so little development and growth that there's been the kilter between supply and demand has just got further and further out of control. I've got friends that work in the city here. You can actually see the magnificent view if I pan round. You can see the main city with all the banking sectors, and you know, these are the same mates that for me, they work in these sectors. I've been talking to them, and industry is really picking up. Mergers and acquisitions are going, the investment banks are spending money, they're hiring again, they're headhunting. All good signs, because that is what drives the city. That is the capital economic engine behind the city, and that is what's happening. But what is happening from a property perspective? Well, you know, as an example, you can look to buy in some of these suburbs out there around the bridge there. My brother actually used to live just over the hill. And these are some of the most expensive suburbs, very close to the CBD, and they're fantastic. A friend of mine, the same friend that was a banker, I went and looked at property there. You're looking at north of $2 million for a rectangular house, you know, in a good area close to the CBD. But where you really need to focus is the growth nodes. That is what's happening. And you drive 35 kilometers out in a direction like that, and they create entire growth nodes. I went today to the Northwest Business Park. There are tens of thousands of people working there. Some of the biggest companies like Woolworths and everyone have their headquarters there. I was absolutely fascinated. And what you've got is you've then got nodes around it like Prowse Hill. I went to go and look at Prowse Hill. There's properties there anywhere from 1 million to 1.2 million. But the important properties are the ones in the suburban areas around there that are priced from sort of 600,000 through to about 800,000. Very typical middle income Australian homes, 4 bedrooms, 4 Australian families. They've got the recreational areas. But the most important thing, and Louis from Ozinvest was showing me all around these areas, is that people live in those areas. They drive to the bus stop, they park their car, and they've got direct bus lines straight into the city. Not trying to drive on the normal road. They've got their own bus lanes, even with tunnels and everything that go under towns so that they can get directly in. And from areas like that, it takes 35 to 45 minutes directly into the city. You're sitting on an air-conditioned bus. So people tend to want to live in those suburbs. He took me to Prowse Hill, which is a shopping centre there. It's like Melrose Arch, but it's about 100 times bigger. It's got absolutely everything. It's a man-made city. All the parking is underneath. It's got every shopping that you need. It's got the cinemas. So at the end of the day, people live in these areas and they have no need to come in the CBD. Sure, they come in the CBD to watch the opera or maybe a bit of sport, but that is where the growth nodes are. That is what is happening. He took me out to some of the areas, you know, just on the fringe of that are still farmlands. They've still got cows. But that is where one needs to look, because in 10 or 15 years, those will be the built-up areas. And at the end of the day, they all tend to be in that zone, 35, even as far as 50 or 60 kilometers, because that is where middle-income Australia wants to live. They can't afford to live in here. It costs $60 to come and park your car in the CBD for an hour. This is not the reality of what middle-income Australia is looking for, and that's where you really need to focus on. With regards to the market as a whole, there's been very limited supply. There's very difficult to get land here. It's very difficult to get planning, and so there's been very little supply come into the market, and that has caused a huge demand, and that is what has now caused rental property to really the vacancies to drop below 1%, but also from a demand from price growth. Price growth has gone up. City is now in the top 3 performing cities in the whole country. Sydney as one of the top 3 performing cities that is actually seeing this growth basically, and that for me is a fascinating thing. And lastly, you know, most of the buyers that are in this market are actually home buyers because they're just desperate. They want to get property. Louis today was showing me where people actually camp out overnight to try and get access to their dream home and live the Australian dream in terms of buying their Australian home. The investors, they're not in the market at the moment. They've been concerned about the Brisbane floods. They're worried about what's happening still with the global financial crisis. Are we in for a double dip? They're worried about interest rates going up, and recently they're now worried about Japan. So investors are not the ones that are propping these markets up and that are driving these markets. It's home buyers. It's people that are dreaming and destined that they want to buy their own home and they want to live in those homes, they want to live in those suburbs. And those are the people that you need to be focusing on, because those are people that underpin the market. But at the end of the day, anything sub 500,000, very, very difficult to find. You've got to be finding it on the urban boundary, but they're around these growth nodes. And if I've got one thing to teach you from Sydney, it's these growth nodes. Well, let's be honest, the whole of Australia, it's these growth nodes that are so important, because they build these town centers, they build the work opportunities, they put in the infrastructure, and that is where people go and live. And if you get into these areas early, that is where you're going to see significant capital growth. And depending on what you're looking for, once it's established, that is where the rental growth comes from. So that's my from Sydney. At the end of the day, I'm very pleasantly surprised. Most people are saying to me that Sydney and Brisbane are the two places to watch. And certainly when you look at the statistics from a vacancy perspective, rental demand, supply and demand fundamentals, this place really needs to be on your radar. Thank you.